Hello everybody and welcome to this week's Toriko chapter review, chapter 327. And I hope not that this week's chapter wasn't, as mind-blowingly expositional as the previous chapters. I mean, first we start off by recapping on the very first page who the teams are and where they go, which um Ayamaru is able to use the slime ultimate technique to create the optimal path to getting to each area and to each item remaining item on Kasha's full course. But remembers and states that, okay, this can't predict for any, sudden weather changes and for any, wild beasts that might get in your way. Then we have a brief scene of Toriko, Rin and Toriko, it's like, oh, be careful, and, Toriko's like, oh, we'll get married when we meet back up together in a month. Toriko also reminds that, when him and Komatsu meet up again in a month, that they will have completed their full course. And the groups go off in their various groupings for traveling, or camping monsters for traveling. Tengu Brunchy and Zebra are in some type of friggin' battleship pufferfish with a capture level of 1200. Friggin' Zebra's all cool, calm, and collected, which is totally in a totally badass way, because that's Zebra, and you have Brunchy just freaking out, complaining, oh, why did I have to be with you? And then not too long after leaving, a giant unknown fish seemingly goes after the ship, and the battleship starts blasting it. Then we have the Wall House, which is some type of basically a giant ugly walrus-looking creature. Its capture level of 720, and you have freaking Sunny, complaining about how ugly the ship is, but at the same time, why do you have to partner with Libear? I'd be like, oh, you can just call me Libear for short, Sunny-chan. The thing that I found most interesting was the fact that I thought they were going to Area 4, because he says that they say that Area 5 is the most beautiful place in Gourmet World, don't they? I suppose that's why we were chosen for this. Now that was the Batoto translation, and it's kind of odd because they just spent all that time telling us how it was supposedly Area 4, they were going to Area 4. Now you're going to tell me that he's going to go back on his word and switch back to Area 5? It just doesn't make any sense as to why it's confusing, because last week we were all talking about, well, we thought Delarus was in Area 4. You're trying to tell me that now they're going to start to switch things up again? Of course, that could also be a translation error, but when it comes to numbers, it shouldn't be that, you think that numbers wouldn't be the translation error, especially when it's as simply as 4 or 5. Barely, you're barely getting that high. So, of course, Sunny's like, oh, I don't want to be, I have no idea, Then we switch over to the camping monster submarine Jack, which has a Tyron and Coco, and Tyron makes the point that since you have 2 poison users, that they were most likely chosen because it will not be a very easy place to approach. And it is also said by Coco that this is Area 3 where the poison where they're going is where the IGO's zeroth biotope is located. So it's definitely, these pairings have definitely produced some interesting things. We have, and then of course we have, Toriko and Sunny, or not Sunny, Toriko and Stajun flying on his giant beast, dragon beast type creature. So it's that is just going to be one hell of a adventure. Now they have some talking, some here and there, but the important thing they talk about is the fact that they mention the idea of, even though they've never eaten a particular food, that they are actually towards drawn towards that certain ingredient. Particularly in Toriko's case, he says, "I've never eaten God, but I've already decided to make it the main dish of my full course since a long time ago." Thinking that maybe it wasn't me that decided it, but rather an appetite inside of me. Starjun goes to point out how different Toriko's become, saying that he's gotten stronger and that he's pretty much almost a totally different person from back then. Well, because up to that point, when you think back at it, up until Toriko faced Starjun in that really serious fight in the Cooking Island arc, I can't even think of a moment where Toriko actually lost a fight. And Toriko's like, that one defeat he suffered will never go away, even if he piles up 10,000 victories after that. And that loss has left a wound on him in his chest. And I don't know exactly who says this, but someone says that right now I have a feeling the result would be the opposite. Either Toriko or Starjun is admitting that it's basically saying that Toriko is stronger than Starjun right now. But then again, we didn't see if Starjun had air yet, and we don't know if he actually had any of the pair while he was at it. So it's definitely interesting to see that. Then Gigi goes into the whole explanation about the backworld, and that there are 4 doors to get there. The first 3 are located on one of 3 islands at the 3 corners of the Black Triangle: the East 6, the South 6, and the West 6. And that each of them have one of the 4 food spirit doors on them. But the environments are too terrible because they're surrounded by things like tornadoes that are over 10 kilometers wide and wild beasts over level 2000 swimming around them. And he says, he doesn't say, "Oh, it's not like we can't go there. It's just that there's no reason to expose us to, this danger." And that if they go to this civilization of Area 6 that they're going is the home of the 4th food spirit door, which is the safest and easiest to enter. Now we also find out that it's the biggest, and not only that, but it's the biggest and most, prosperous civilization in the world, entitled the Underwater Gourmet Capital Blue Grill. And that it's a giant city in the deep sea which contains tons of masterful chefs, and it is pretty much as busy as the human world was at the peak of the gourmet age. Of course, Komatsu's all excited to go, and then Gigi has, friggin' lifts his eyebrows. You can see his eyes. I'd certainly like for it to be fun, meaning there's something that he's not telling us about this place. So we're gonna have another suspicious character. I mean, the fact that he's helping them collect the gourmet ingredients means he's not, or cautious full course does not, basically tells me that he's good. But there's something that he's leaving out about this civilization. And then in the final panel of the chapter, we have them preparing to enter the Black Triangle from underwater. having the giant clam camping monster and the turtleloon, which will probably be key to getting them from area to area. Now, this chapter, there was, like I said earlier, not as much like over the top, like OMG exposition happened, but a lot of it did, important stuff happened. And so the prospects for the future are immense. Now, this was obviously necessary for the separation. Next week's chapter is where we're gonna start to see how Mitsutoshi is going to move forward from here. Is he going to choose to, have each chapter focus on what each of the groups are doing? Or is he going to focus on maybe two groups at a chapter or something? Or is we going to focus on Komatsu's group, see what happens with them, and then go back in time, say, and then the next arc will be, then we'll have another arc where we see what Zebra and Brunchy went through in area to capture news and whatnot. So it could be that. There's many different ways he can go about doing this. But the fact of the matter is that honestly, I'd rather we spend time going through each ingredient one after the other. Like, okay, we see, even though yes, they're technically all going after them at the same time, I would rather it be that we see each capturing of each ingredient in its entirety before we move on to the next ingredient. I don't want to go back and forth because, that is very difficult to do, going back and forth, seeing what each person's doing, and especially when there's so many important details about each area, it can be kind of confusing, especially since we're going to learn a lot of various pieces of information. Because they also talked about how they should try and utilize the friggin' scanner things to somehow communicate and relay information as often as they can. So we might get we could also be focusing on another in Area 6, and then every so often get some pieces of information from like the other groups, and then when we go actually focus on them, we'll find out, okay, well, this is where what was happening. There's tons of different possibilities. I just hope that we don't skip over a lot of the stuff that happens in the other areas, because they're definitely going to be amazing. The interactions between the characters are going to be awesome. So, the one last thing I want to touch on is the inconsistency with the areas of the Goy world. Because now, in last week's chapter, we had the epically confusing part about how they said that now the Area 4 is where Earth is, and that's where the Mother Snake is in that area. But now they're trying to tell it in this chapter that Area 5 is. So it's kind of like, okay, it's confusing because we need to know where, it's very inconsistent as to what, where these creatures are located. It's not something that I like when they this inconsistent. I mean, once we get to the various areas, it'll obviously be known. So it's definitely alright. Now look, I'm looking at the wiki right now. Dragon King Delarus is unknown in an unknown area. Wolf King Guinness is in an unknown area. Bird King, we don't know what his name is, but he's unknown. Snake King, unknown, is declared as Area 4. Area 5's Snake King is not only unknown in terms of its location, but what it is. Whale King Moon is Area 6, Monkey King Batman is 7, Horse Monarch Heracles Area 8. So it's so far there's only one. It's just really odd that they're so inconsistent. and I hope that we get some clarification in upcoming chapters. And I know it seemed like I've been, rambling on, but this is Toriko, and Toriko is awesome. So this chapter was a good chapter. It was a very good chapter. It could have been better if there would have been, at least, take a little bit off because of inconsistencies. But I hope you guys enjoyed this review and hope to see you next week.
Alright, y'all, it's time for Toriko. Again, the chapter of the week. So I guess let's get into it right away. Where do I start here? I'm gonna start with I'm gonna do the different viewpoints, kind of like Game of Thrones review, but there's not much to talk about in terms of each review or each viewpoint. So I guess we'll start with Toriko and Starjun because obviously main character and one of the main rivals. Uh, the interesting thing about Toriko and Starjun was really the fact that Starjun noted that he's different. He's a completely different person, and now the power difference is different if depending on who is the one that said um, let me go find it. Right now, I have the feeling that the result would be the opposite. It was not shown who said those words, but the power difference is likely decided by who the one who said that. Um, because if Toriko said that, that's just hype. If Starjun said that, well then it's probably true. Um, but it said like, because Starjun said, I'd say you probably got stronger. So I think it was Toriko who said those words because I think personally I think Starjun still thinks he's stronger, but we'll see. Uh, I think Starjun's probably as strong as him still, or stronger, because Starjun was stronger than Toriko pre-time skip, but whether or not he is now, I think he is. I think he is just as strong, if not stronger, right now. By the end of the series, no, absolutely not. Because if you think about it, Starjun awakened after his fight with Toriko, meaning that he was stronger than Toriko, and then he awakened, meaning he was even stronger than that, and that was pre-time skip. So just going off that hype alone, I think personally that Starjun should be equal or stronger. By the end of the series, hell no. Toriko will likely be the most powerful character in the verse, if not Midora. And the reason I say that is because a lot of people are saying that Midora is going to go up against Akashia and lose. However, that may actually not be the case. Because we expected Toriko to fight Midora back in the day, we expected that to happen. However, when Neo showed up, now we have two separate storylines going here. Because Ichiryu and Midora basically set like that storyline as a part of Ichiryu and Midora's story. The fact that it's collided with Toriko's is one thing. However, it is my belief that there is a fair chance that actually the final battle is going to be Toriko with maybe the Heavenly Kings against Joa or the Planet Eater or whatever. Meanwhile, I think it may end up being Midora versus Akashia once Midora has eaten the full course of Akashia. Because if that's the case, he'll be a lot stronger. Obviously, we know Akashia was very strong, extremely powerful. But does that mean that somebody can't surpass him? No. He's people say he's a god, like god of the verse. That's not true. He's not. He could be considered a demi, which is surpassable. but far from a god. So um, I think the big question is, will Midora ever surpass Akashia by eating the full course? And I think it's probable because this whole hungry space, like I know now who to aim my tongue spear at, whatever. Could absolutely foreshadow that the final battle could be set up where, similar to how Toriko was against Starjun at the end of part one, and Ichiryu was against Midora, it could end up being the opposite, where Midora is now going up against Akashia and he wins. Um, Meanwhile, Toriko is going up against Joa or Planet Eater. Who knows? We just don't know at this point. But back to the chapter itself. I know I trailed off a lot, but I try not to do it, but I do every now and then. Um, so I mean, Coco and Tyron. There's not much to say there, except that the zeroth biotope was there, and just in general, like they're happy to be working together and shit like that. So it's apparently going to be a difficult place. Zebra and Tengu, they have this giant ass beast underwater creature coming after them. So we'll see what happens there. They're obviously not happy working together, but he wants to fucking he wants to fucking fight already. Of course he does. It's Zebra. And Coco is or Sani's obviously not happy, but at least he's going to the garden, so whatever. And lastly, Area 6 seems to be a very interesting setup where there's actually a door in Human World, and we have the new place, which is a Blue Grill, which I think the initial look looks pretty decent. I do kind of like it, Blue Grill. We'll see what happens there, but like the artwork looks cool, like in the last page, because you can see like half of it is like dark and the half of it is like black. So they're about to get into the black triangle. Hopefully, um, I'm really hoping that the pacing here doesn't really suffer. I'm hoping that Mitsutoshi does a really good job of breaking up how he um, shows the viewpoints, because this could very likely end up like Game of Thrones, how the viewpoints work. I hope not, because sometimes that pacing can be really bad, where nothing gets done all season, and then something happens in like episode 9, and like, oh fuck. So that's it. This chapter overall was really good, and yeah. So thank you for listening, and I'll see you all next week.